All right, thanks to everyone. And I'm going to turn the session over to Henry Dunbar, who is on the steering committee for the Youth Bike Summit. Henry?
Thank you, Karen. Thank you everyone for attending. I also first want to thank Karen, Bill Nesper, and the League for providing this forum for the youth bike participants to the National Bike Summit. This is the first time we're doing this or something like this, so it's a bit of an experiment. We will see how it goes and hopefully start a new tradition of youth involvement in the National Bike Summit. As the title suggests, this is a sort of an open mic / unconference style event in that we don't have a set agenda on topics, but we'll be sussing those out during the next hour and a half, or excuse me, next half hour, and then going into breakout rooms as we identify topics that are important to the youth cyclist of today. That will be the first 30 minutes of the sessions. And then we have 4 members of the Youth Bike Council who will be then facilitating those, and then a couple of members of the Adult Steering Committee, if you will, of the Youth Bike Summit to also facilitate if we need. I do want to emphasize that this session is to prioritize the youth voice in the cycling movement. So we want to give priority to the younger cyclists who are attending this session. Those of us of a certain age like myself are welcome to participate, but we ask that you go primarily in listen mode and again, let the priorities be to those youth voices that we're here to hear from and learn from. So again, I'll just go over the sort of the very loose agenda and the schedule. We'll spend 30 minutes using a Jamboard that I will let Zoe describe what that is to identify topics. We will go into breakout rooms based on those topics and where you want to go for the next 90 minutes from 1:30 to 3. Around 3 o'clock, we'll come back out. We will report out and then continue discussions if we need to. But at some point then Atiba and myself will talk about the Youth Bike Summit, which is coming up this fall, and what we can carry forward from today's session into that next, hopefully in-person session in Atlanta. So with that, I would like to introduce the Youth Bike Council members who will be facilitating today's session. First off, there's Joshua Funches, who is a youth cyclist advocate who began his career as a bike mechanic in Philadelphia. His desire for bicycling and passion for youth development has led him to connect with both worlds and seek for change. Currently, Joshua is the president of the National Youth Bike Council and serves as an ambassador to the Youth Bike Summit Steering Committee. I've gotten to know Joshua in the last few months. I'm working with that, and he's a very impressive young man. So I look forward to hearing from him today. We also have Bria Brown, who is a first-year student at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and she founded the Atlanta Students Advocating for Pedestrians when she was in high school in Atlanta. We also have Nora Ball, also of Atlanta, who is a junior at Midtown High School there and president of the Atlanta Students for Advocating for Pedestrians. She has also served as an intern for the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition and is on the Youth Advisory Board for the National Youth Bike Summit. And then finally, Zoe Mitchell, who is a member of the National Youth Bike Council since 2019. She currently lives in Seattle and is a volunteer bike mechanic at Bike Works in Seattle. Also helping out today is Neil Walker, who is also on the National Youth Bike Summit Steering Committee. He currently is the board president of the Bragg Dream Team, which is the bike ride across Georgia. He is works out of Pittsburgh and is also a member, as I said, of the Youth Bike Summit Steering Committee. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Zoe, who is going to tell us how we're going to use the Jamboards to facilitate and identify topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Hello, everyone. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the Jamboard. If you haven't used Jamboard before, it's just an interactive page where everyone can put something up on a Jamboard and everyone else who is on that can also see it. If you can't access the Jamboard, you can go ahead and just raise your hand in here and I can write down your ideas on it too. But yeah, for the next 30 minutes, go ahead, write on a sticky note what you want to talk about or one topic that you think we should do for breakout rooms. And we'll be picking 4 of them at the end of the 30 minutes to discuss. So go ahead. Thank you, everyone who's so far put topics on the board. These are some great ones. I'm going to be organizing them into patterns or like ones that are relatively alike on the board. If you also see some that you think are pretty similar, you can put them next to each other. All right, as we're seeing some topics form, I'm going to put like broad titles over each of them, and these will be more or less the breakout rooms we go into. But keep putting topics up there. The breakout rooms that we go into right now can shift in the next 15 minutes as we start figuring those out.
Just saw a few new people joining, so if you're just joining, what we're using is this Jamboard link to post our ideas as we're about to split off into different breakout rooms. So I posted again in the chat just in case you can't see it, if you want to take a look and also contribute your own ideas.
Yeah, so as we're seeing some of these topics form, I think we have a really good list. Things for different people, and you guys will be able to break yourselves out into groups that are like into the topics that really interest you. And then while you're in those groups, we recommend that you stay for like 15 to 20 minutes or however long you want. And then you can hop to another group, but we do want to like foster that communication and that, you know, conversation about these different topics and just make sure everybody gets out of this event what they want to. And then also in the breakout rooms, we'll do another Jamboard for each breakout room and just kind of write down the main ideas or just some of the things that you guys talk about. So it is important to, you know, bring up these good ideas in these breakout rooms the same way we are with these topics that we want to hear about.
So we have all 4 breakout rooms established currently, and I'm on standby just to open them up when we're ready.
All in your breakout rooms, there are different pages on the Jamboard if you click the arrows at the top of the screen there. So once you get in your breakout room, the number will correspond to whatever topic you guys are talking about. You're welcome to take notes, you don't have to, but at the end of breakout rooms, we are going to be asking facilitators to speak out or share out what you guys talked about. But yeah, those are just there if you want to take notes.
It looks like the topics that we have are bike road safety skills and education, youth advocacy and empowerment, youth advocacy and social justice, and how to engage youth and foster partnerships. So I think the breakout rooms are open and feel free to go.
So we're welcoming everyone back to the main room. It is now 2:50. We will leave it to the room leaders or the breakout room leaders to discuss the points that were brought about, because we have 10 minutes before we move on to our next session here at the Youth Bike Summit. So I'll open it up to Joshua and to Henry and to Nora and Bria to share the things that were discussed in your rooms.
I can start first. Looks like everybody's here. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today and then being a part of this conversation and in the conversations in their respective breakout rooms. I can lead for my room. We didn't have too many people, but we were talking about generally how to engage youth and foster partnerships around biking. Some of the ideas we had were to do bike to school days and reward them with prizes. Bake sale and fundraising events to generate some money to possibly, you know, buy bikes or bike accessories for students who may need them. And then also work with local companies who may be able to give those items out for free if possible. And then a few of the last little ideas we had were to encourage students to continue writing, but also to make writing something fun. I think past elementary school, it kind of maybe falls off. But to continue to foster that love for writing. And the last idea we had was to make people aware of the public spaces they have that are safe and that are free for youth to ride on. I know in Atlanta we have the Beltline, and that is somewhere that is, you know, a safe zone for riders where they don't have to worry about, you know, will they get hit or, you know, different factors you may think about if you're riding on the street. And with that, I guess I can hand it off to Josh. I was in his group for a little bit and they had a great conversation. So I'd love to see what you guys kind of thought about and wrote down on the board.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely did have a great conversation. There was a lot to talk about in the youth and advocacy and empowerment. We sort of split up into 4 sections, anywhere between organizations being a little bit more involved in how they want to talk about advocacy and present that to young people. Not enough young people being present when it comes to advocacy, and that's just like peer to peer, and also like having the availability to get there. The third one was not knowing what to do or who to talk to, which was a strong reason for a lot of disconnect between young people being involved in sometimes like their local bicycle coalitions. And then the last one was like how to get youth views and representations. We had a lot of great ideas. Some of the ones I wanted to share specifically is I just want to share 3. This one, what we wrote down was adult allies are just as important when it knows, when knowing like when it's too much for a young person. So as much as we ask for like the room, the space to say things, sometimes it's too much, like to ask a young person to not only speak up, but then also do their own advocacy for it. So knowing when to like take what young people are saying and use the power that some adults have that young people don't have to take that and run with it and say like, this is the sort of thing that a lot of the people that are this specific age range are asking for. This is what we need help with. Another thing is a point on who are being affected. Sometimes in specific newsletters, you might see like, oh, cyclist was hit by blank, or cyclist was hit by a moving car, or car ended up blank on cyclist. But instead changing that to like daughter, husband, like it makes much of a difference when we see who was actually being impacted, which gives us more empowerment. And the last portion was just connecting more so and putting more spotlight on bicycles in the different ways that they can be used. And advocacy would be one of those ways. Because right now, like I said earlier, they don't know how, what to do, stuff like that. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Zoe. It looks like you had a lot of people in your room.
Yeah, we had great conversations in our room. So we were talking about how to teach bike and cycling and road safety skills, especially to youth. We started out talking about there's this one program, Bike in the Park, and it was a program in DC to involve second graders in biking. And they found that it really enabled them to develop riding skills. So we were talking about like how do we involve and how do we get more programs to involve younger students and teach them how to bike. One obstacle that we continuously ran into was like finding the funding and finding the manpower. A lot of public schools, there's a lot of red tape to go through, a lot of hoops to jump through of like how can we implement programs within the school and still make it safe for everyone. And the other one was manpower. There's a lot of talk about like teachers are really there's a lot of pressure on teachers to like do this when they already have a lot of work to do just teaching in general. So we're talking about like what how we can get volunteers to help, who would be there to volunteer to help teach students how to ride bikes, and let's see, we talked about how some cycling programs don't talk about the social aspect, so it's very car centric and very much like how do you stay safe on the road. We found it was hard to like decide how to motivate kids to want to learn how to bike, especially if a lot of kids get rides from their parents to school. It's like, how do we motivate them to want to ride their bike to school? And one of the ways, or some of the ideas we came up with, like telling or teaching them about how you can get places faster, teaching them about how it's empowering and how they don't have to rely on anyone but themselves to get themselves places on a bike. And then some of the last topics we talked about is programs and education programs that also implement like fix-a-flats, small fixes for bikes, because a lot of the big obstacle to people riding a bike is they have a flat, so it sits in the garage and they don't know how to fix it. So that was where some of the things that we talked about.
I think our group was the last, and we were the youth advocacy and social justice. And we had a really great conversation that tackled a lot. So a lot, when you see bike advocacy people don't really associate it with social justice, but when in fact that is far from the truth, and that a lot social justice and bike advocacy are very well connected, from anywhere of addressing street names and places of the places that you're bike riding on. You know, we had a lot of people from Atlanta and Virginia and Los Angeles, and they all had either like Confederate streets that were named after Confederate soldiers or white supremacists, and a lot of history there. And then we also talked about the importance of educating and starting conversations and having welcoming communities to everyone, and especially how do we use the bike as a tool to promote equality in education and to start conversations. And we discussed how bikes allow for freedom of transportation for youth. So even if you cannot drive a car because you're too young, you can bike places. And that, for a lot of people, the bike for young people especially is how you can travel anywhere. And so realizing traveling, and part of the justice journey, which we also talked about, which is about informing and writing on these paths where civil rights movements happen, or suffragist movements also happened. So using the bike as a form of education. And yeah, what else did we talk about? I think, yeah. Oh, and we also talked about the history specifically of the biking community, and even with the National Bike Council today, with the history of having cycling, of being not allowing African Americans and women to join the council. These are big things that a lot of people don't know about, and if we're ever going to talk about them, first we need to, you know, acknowledge that they're there. So taking those steps. Yeah. I think that was, anyone from my group want to add a bit to that? I might have skipped something, but I think that was it.
I think that's a good opportunity to segue to our, I'm sorry, do we have another report coming in?
I was just about to segue as well.
Okay, we're going to segue into conversations about the justice journey and those things. So Henry, I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you, Neil. As I said in the beginning of the introduction, a lot of this is being driven by the Youth Bike Summit, which we organize. So I am going to just cover a brief history of how the Youth Bike Summit got started, and what we want to try to collect from this. And I will then hand off to Hatiba to talk about the next host site and some of the things we've been doing in the interim in between the summits to get it going. So let me just share my screen here. And this will be just a couple of minutes. So I apologize because my presentation file got corrupted. I had to rebuild it quickly this morning, so some of my graphics are a little sloppy. But the Youth Bike Summit coming up this year later, hopefully tentatively planned for October of 2021 in Atlanta, hosted by the Bragg Dream Team and the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the end. But I want to talk about how we got started. So the Youth Bike Summit was born out of a conversation that these two young ladies had when they returned from the National Bike Summit in 2010. They had attended, they were participants in the Recycle a Bicycle program in New York City. And on the bus ride back, the story goes, they were debriefing with their adult chaperones and asked, what did you think about the summit? And they're like, well, it was okay, but we really didn't see anybody there who looked like us. We weren't really represented, and we couldn't really relate to what was going on because we were, in essence, outsiders. And so with that, in 2011, Recycle a Bicycle decided to start the Youth Bike Summit in New York, first as a way to connect their local community, and the members of their programs to the local bicycling community. But they quickly saw that it was a much bigger movement going on. And in its first year, they attracted over 175 attendees from 14 different states. So what was supposed to be kind of just a local thing really already started to turn into a national movement. The new school in New York provided a free space to gather and became a full partner in growing and sustaining it. And they quickly formed a national steering committee to sort of take this program much bigger. The steering committee, of which I and Tiba and Neil are members, as is Joshua, set these guiding principles for future Youth Bike Summits. I won't read them all, but you can see it's all about inclusivity, multicultural diversity, and equity, and all of the things that we know and love about bicycling as a movement, but also making sure that it's built into the Youth Bike movement. The Youth Bike Summit, as it's formed now, is a 3-day conference that brings together students, educators, advocates, researchers, policymakers, community leaders, and such, really with a primary focus to give youth a voice, to gather and share ideas, and encourage civic engagement and advocacy. Through workshops, presentations, keynotes, discussion, and visioning, we try to transform this dialogue into action. The Youth Bike Summit is a supportive, encouraging, and inclusive space that welcomes and highlights diversity of perspectives relating to advocacy, activism, and social justice. We also cover things like job training and health, policy, infrastructure, transportation and mobility, climate change, you name it, anything related to the bicycles we do. All of this is supporting bicycling as a catalyst for change and health in our communities. The steering committee, after 4 years of hosting this in New York, decided it was time to take this show on the road literally, and started moving the Youth Bike Summit around the country. As you can see, we went to Bike Works in Seattle, Washington in 2015, Cycles for Change in St. Paul in 2016, Phoenix Bikes, which I'm a part in 2017 here in Arlington, and then back to New York in 2019. In 2020, it was supposed to go to Atlanta, but as with many things, the pandemic disrupted that, and so we're hoping to get back there in the fall. As I said, Youth Bike Summit presents both leaders currently and the ones we hope to see in the future, both to speak, present, and be an integral part of this. This is not just presenting and talking down to the children. They are very much involved in the organizing and presenting and bringing about the content. We've seen tremendous impact. These are just some of the examples of projects and initiatives that have come out of the Youth Bike Summit directly. So in attending a lot of these things, are growths of what we've been able to put together. Over the 9 years, it has also grown to attract over 900 people from 28 states and 4 different countries, live streaming in the middle of the conference itself. And more importantly, the impact on participation. I've said to many people when I go to the Youth Bike Summits, it has achieved the kind of diversity that the bicycling community has been working and trying to do. We have over 50% of the attendees are women or women identifying, and over 50% are people of color. So in most bicycling organizations, when you go there, again, it's a pretty homogenous group, and that is not what we see at the Youth Bike Summit. But primarily, I wanted to state that we have fun at these things. It's not just all about policy and advocacy that can sometimes be dry in their presentations. All of these things, we do a great job of making sure that everybody participates and has a great time. As you can see, lots of smiles on the faces of the people who attend these things. I've been greatly energized at every single one that I've attended, and strongly encourage people who want to be involved in youth bike advocacy that they should attend the summits as a ways to get energized and keep moving. So as I said, in 2021, this fall, we're tentatively planning to have the Youth Bike Summit in Atlanta. And the steering committee is hoping to learn from this session today about what topics that we should be focusing on and including in the upcoming summit. And so with that, I would like to hand off to Atiba Mbiwan, who is going to talk a little bit about the host site in Atlanta and some of the programming we've been doing in the interim until it gets started. So Atiba.
Thanks, Henry. Can you hear me? Greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. Today it's about 68 degrees and sunny, and it's February the 28th. 2 years ago, in February, we were in New York City for the Youth Bike Summit, and it was about 20 degrees that Sunday. So we said, if we're going to host the Youth Bike Summit, we want to make sure it's in a nice, warm time frame. And so we agreed to host it in March of 2020 because our spring starts really at this point in time. And so the end of March would be perfect timing to be outside because it's nice and warm, but it's not humid, which is the other problem in Atlanta. It can get very humid here. But as you know, a year ago, this little tiny thing called the coronavirus arrived. And so shelter in place, pandemic hit, and here we are. I just want to tell you some good news this week. The Georgia governor, who doesn't really like to make a statewide policy, said that on March the 8th, so a little more than a week from now, all the teachers in Georgia will be allowed to get vaccinated. So up until now, it's been virtual for most schools, hybrid for some, and very few who've actually gone back. And in Atlanta public schools, it's been primarily virtual up until now. And so we're hoping that this school year will end with teachers feeling comfortable to be in the building and students, so that we can then confirm that Atlanta can host the October 2021 Youth Bike Summit at one of the Atlanta public schools, and especially the school that used to be called Grady High School, that's now Midtown High School. And we have Nora Ball from the school, who's on our Atlanta Youth Advisory Council. We have Bria, who graduated during the pandemic last year and is now at the University of Virginia, who's on this. And we have Marley, who, you won't believe it, he's a middle school student in Atlanta Public Schools who currently this semester is studying from Mexico. And so he's on this call with us, but the connection from Mexico is not very good. So you can't see him visually, but he can chat with you. So I want you to know they're all on this, and so they will be able to answer your questions as well. But let me show you something real quick. This is the latest issue of Atlanta Magazine. Atlanta is a bicycling town. It doesn't tell you, but the woman on here, Tara, is a high school teacher. And so she will be bringing some of her students to the Youth Bike Summit. So again, we hope that we'll have them do a story about the Youth Bike Summit in the fall issue of Atlanta Magazine. But I know Bria, Nora, and even Marley have been interviewed on the local public radio station in Atlanta about their work they've done as young leaders with safe cycling. And so I think, again, we will have an opportunity on the local public radio station as well to promote this. But the thing that we've done to try to sustain the momentum during this pandemic is the justice journey. And the idea, again, was to help young people all over the country take advantage of this pandemic by getting outside and riding in safe, socially distant ways, but with a purpose. And one is to promote the Youth Bike Summit, but also to support social justice activities and movements in their localities. And our Bragg Dream Team the Bike Ride Across Georgia Dream Team. We have clubs in Atlanta and all the way down to the Georgia coast. And our Geechee Kunda Dream Team club on the Georgia coast is led by a coach in Brunswick, Georgia. And as you know, a year ago, the horrific hunting and killing of Ahmaud Arbery took place in Brunswick. And so our dream team did a bike ride in June of last year on Juneteenth to help lift up the justice fight for Ahmaud Arbery and support his family. And as a result, we brought this idea to the National Youth Bike Summit steering committee to say, can we do a justice journey all year long, starting in 2020 into 2021, to promote the Youth Bike Summit for the fall of 2021. And the National Steering Committee agreed it was something good to do. And then People for Bikes contacted us and said they had raised money to support youth cycling. And as a result, we have a mini grant program and $500 grants to youth organizations in the United States. And I say in the United States because at this moment, I want to recognize Ainsley Naylor. She's coming to us all the way from Canada, the great city of Toronto, with a youth cycling organization that has participated in the Youth Bike Summit in the past. But the grant program we couldn't give to someone in another country, but they're part of our family, so we managed to get them some money in another way. So again, we want to make sure that we can keep this momentum leading up to October in Atlanta, and we're going to do a bike ride at the beginning. That's sort of the end of the justice journey. And that ride will highlight different aspects of justice in Atlanta. And one of them really is sort of near and dear to our Atlanta Youth Advisory Council, because one of their sister students, Alexia Heineman, was killed 5 years ago on a bike ride after school, right on the corner where her school is located and the Atlanta Beltline. So we're going to honor her and her family's fight for bike safety and justice at that point. But I have to tell you some other good news this week, because we have two new senators in the United States Senate from Georgia, John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. I don't know about Ossoff because I've actually never seen him on a bike, even in commercials. But Warnock, I know, is a cyclist. And so this week, I was talking to his staff people, and I told them that we're having a Youth Bike Summit, and we would love for him to send a message to the Youth Bike Summit as a new U.S. Senator to support safe cycling, social justice. And they said, yes, they could talk to him about that, but they will also ask him to ride in the justice journey with us. So let's keep our fingers crossed that the logistics work out, because we may have a special guest riding with us on the justice journey to the Youth Bike Summit in October. Finally, I just want to say, I know my coach Neil is on this. When we were in New York in February 2019 for the Youth Bike Summit, the young people said, please, in Atlanta, don't keep us in school all day. And so I just want to let you know we want to have a youth bike summit where 90% of the activities are outside. And so we're going to open up the workshop proposal process this spring for people to submit ideas. But really right now is where we want to begin to collect ideas from you all about what should happen come October. Before we open it up though, I want to let Bria, Nora, and Molly say something. Bria, you can start.
Oh, not exactly entirely sure what to say. I'll just say this. When we were planning the Youth Bike Summit for last year, I was very, 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 very excited. We had many meetings, ideas were flowing. I was very excited to meet my fellow members of the National Youth Bike Council and share our love for riding. Unfortunately, it was canceled, but I do look forward to seeing everybody hopefully in October. And I think you guys will have a great time in Atlanta. If you've never been to Atlanta, it's a great city, a lot of things to do. We're working on infrastructure for cyclists, but you know, we're ahead of the game in comparison to many other cities. So I invite you guys to register when the time comes and to get pumped about this event too.
Yeah, when Atiba says it was 90% gonna be outside, it was 90% and will be 90% outside. We really wanted to, and this is why we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to rain and that it was going to be very nice weather outside and that it would be warm and it wouldn't be freezing cold. But and I think the best thing about the Youth Bike Summit is that that allows for the youth to come together and to learn and from each other, but also learn about, as we've all been talking about, how youth advocacy works, how social justice ties into biking, how bike education and bike safety. So the Youth Bike Summit is really a great place to discuss all that we've talked about today.
I don't know if Molly could say something.
Marley is in the chat.
Okay. Okay, then we can open it up to a discussion with ideas